In this episode, we're going to look beyond planning, getting the basics right, bricks and clicks, enhancing the customer journey and creating places to be proud of. It's about what the UK High Street really needs to thrive. Welcome back to the third episode of Retail Reckoning. I'm Clare Bailey and today we're diving into the government's tearing through red tape again. You'll have seen the headlines: alfresco dining zones, fast-track permits, noise protection for music venues, and even auctions for empty high streets. That sounds great, but hang on. Let's not pop the Prosecco just yet.
Yeah, retail reckoning. No space for dusty shelves, 'cause retail reckoning owns the floor.
Planning reform makes good headlines, but it isn't a magic wand. You can't legislate your way out of economic gravity. And you certainly can't save the high street with outdoor seating. Today we're asking, what will it really take for the high street to thrive again? And is planning just a sugarcoating on a much bigger pie? So let's look at this in more detail. Red tape's been slashed, but there's actually an underlying problem. So what's been offered? Easier alfresco permits, simpler conversions for empty shops, a national licensing overhaul, and councils being able to rent out long-term vacant units. It's all very good on paper. And we do need to remove the silly obstacles. I mean, why would a bakery need 9 months of form filling just to put a chair outside? It is important, but the idea of councils auctioning off dead space is great in theory, and who wouldn't want to see a lifeless shop turned into a microbrewery or an artist pop-up overnight? But these are not the fixes. The Centre for Cities, to quote them, said, "High street decline is mostly the result of weak local economies." Well, they're bang on. Planning permission doesn't give people more disposable income. Sidewalk cafes don't pay your staff or your business rents. We're not dealing with zoning problems. We're dealing with an affordability crisis, and that's both for the shoppers and for the shopkeepers, and it's been driven by inflation. And when the news headlines say inflation has fallen to, that's just like somebody had their foot on the accelerator all the way to the floor and it was running away at 10%. And now they've got their foot still on the accelerator, but they're not accelerating as much as they were before. That's not to say that they haven't reached a certain speed. And to put this in context, 10% inflation put prices up 10%. If it drops to 3%, the prices that have already gone up by 10% are now still going up, but only by 3%. That isn't good news. What you almost need is minus numbers in inflation to see prices going back to where they were. Well, that's never going to happen, so something needs to basically change. With that in mind, we need to think about the high costs, the low margins, and the stuff that planning can't touch. To give a bit of a list of what's happening, we know that retailers are being squeezed from every angle. Rent's sky high, living wages has gone up by over 20% in 2 years, energy, insurance and compliance requirements, they've gone through the roof. And now everyone's bracing for national insurance and changes for business rates. The sector is staring down the barrel of an extra 2.3 billion in costs. The government is saying they're going to reform rates, but even if that happens, most small shops and businesses with only one outlet already get relief. So the pain of business rates just gets pushed up to the big players. But it's the big players that drive the footfall that support the smaller independents. A few years ago, I saw a stat that the perfect town was about 40% multiple and 60% independent. And the multiples are the anchor stores. So if you lose a Greggs, a Boots, a Primark, and so on, the whole street will suffer. You need that mix. Unfortunately, we're losing banks as well. Now, banks drove footfall, post offices drove footfall. And as those businesses or organisations disappear, the ones who are left, hopefully, will drive the footfall. But if they go because their costs have become untenable and the store becomes non-profitable, then everyone is going to miss out. I want to look at the economy in more detail and a couple of local examples. And it links back to what the Centre for Cities said about it's an economic factor, not something else. So if you take towns like Bradford or Newport, the wages are lower and only £1 in every 10 is spent on leisure. The vacancy rates track at around 16%, Although it depends who you ask with vacancy rates. There are different ways of measuring them, but this is based off the same general measure. Now, if you flip that over to somewhere like York or central London, the dining spend jumps to 25%, but the vacancy rates are under 9%. So the problem isn't planning or parking or any of these other things that people declare are going to save the high street. The reality is it's pay packets. It doesn't matter what you do with regard to planning reform and changes to all these other structures. What you can't do is design your way out of economic inequality. Without people earning enough to go out, whether dining or shopping, planning reform, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Iceberg!
There's another problem as well. There's a massive skills shortage. There's almost no staff, which means there's no service. It's really, really hard to recruit at the moment, especially in hospitality, and the staff turnover is immense. Retail's high, hospitality's higher, and I think I read that gyms were over 100% turnover. Why? Well, people have left the sector. Wages aren't keeping up. And post-COVID, the talent pool shrank because with quite a lot of businesses forced to close, people found other jobs. The other issue is we've seen a massive increase in retail crime. Quite frankly, if you are being paid a low wage, would you rather be in a call centre where you're remote from the customer or in a shop where people get spat at, abused verbally and worse? And both the Retail Trust and the British Retail Consortium are really trying to encourage more emphasis on police intervention over retail crime, because it isn't just shoplifting, it's a whole lot worse. In fact, if you go back to 2020, a survey of retail leaders said 99% were worried about finding staff, and that's at all levels. Of course, planning reform isn't going to change that. You can't run a pop-up cafe in your empty unit if there's nobody there to actually make and serve coffee. Then we also have to look at what customer expectations are, and they've changed too. I'm not doing this for ego or vanity. I'm doing this to make a genuine connection with the people in retail who are interested in the stats, what's happening, and real-world advice. And we also put out a newsletter, which is more of a cross between a newsletter, a blog, and a white paper, because it's a long opinion piece with content, ideas, insights, and recommendations. And we do that every month. And if you'd like to see that, you can subscribe at retailchampion.co.uk/retail-reckoning. We used to talk about omnichannel, multi-channel, bricks and clicks and so on, whatever you want to call it. And it used to be sort of the panacea. I would say now that is the absolute minimum expectation. As retailers and businesses in high streets and so on, there's certain things we can control. The digital presence, the quality of our click and collect, the Google business profile, our local SEO through our e-commerce if we've got one, stock visibility online. And I mean, I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but if you don't show up when someone Googles bike repair near me, you're pretty much invisible. Whoever does show up gets that business. They may not be the cheapest, but they're the most discoverable. And really, a lot of people think online is taken away from the high street, but actually the online footprint, whether it be social, Google Business, e-commerce, any of those things, that should be sending footfall to your door. Argos is a brilliant example. They've absolutely nailed it. They've got reserve online and collect in store. They've got all sorts of other methods by which customers can interact and engage. It's simple and it's effective and it's efficient, because whilst I've been to a number of outlets where they've been rummaging around trying to find my particular parcel, that's never happened to me when I bought from Argos. I mean, it doesn't take much for a small business to set up an e-commerce. You don't need a fancy e-commerce empire. A simple Shopify site or WooCommerce or one of the low-cost or no-cost platforms, a Google shopping feed, some local Facebook ads, or even just being in local Facebook groups and having an active page. Perhaps a QR code on your window to bring people to the online store when you're closed. The thing is, it's not about being overly sophisticated or overthinking it. It's just about the customer journey. Smart, joined up retail, bricks and clicks. And that isn't innovation anymore. That's the basics. That's what it takes to survive. Another area where I feel that more businesses should take more attention and also work with the local authorities and business improvement districts and so on is creating public realm improvements and partnerships. The way I see it is that retail doesn't happen in a vacuum. As I mentioned, if you lose your anchor stores, then you actually lose footfall to your smaller stores. It proves that the whole ecosystem brings the traffic. It's not just one business in isolation. Of course, one business has to market themselves and what they have to offer, their customer experience and so on, but it's also about the whole place. There's a law in geographical terms that says that people like to go to places where they don't live. But if that's the case, people that don't live in your town will be coming to your town, and you might be going to another town. And that's just because they like to shop in places that are new and fresh and explore. But people also like the comfort of shopping in places that they like, that they feel are safe. So cleanliness, safety, lighting in the evening, the ability to walk around, be able to cross the road if you've got a town centre that's bisected by a large highway, for instance. And I've seen a few of those where one side of the road struggles and the other side of the road thrives. And it's also, these days, let's be honest, is it Instagrammable? So it's about spending in public spaces and perhaps creating collaborations to encourage the spend in public spaces. Greenery, trees and planters, benches, places to sit and have a sandwich, murals, street art installation, markets, pop-up music events, all the sort of things that create vibrancy and a happy environment. There are some places that do this really, really well and others that could go a bit further. One of my colleagues, for example, is co-founder of Visit Knoll, effectively a destination marketing organisation hybridised with a business improvement district. Some of the things they've achieved through that collaboration with the retailers and the board, who are also a bunch of small business owners and local people themselves, have been quite impressive for effectively a small town on the edges of Solihull. It's about creating that sense of, it's such a nice place, I enjoy going here. It's clean, it's safe, it's walkable, and it's Instagrammable. The other thing is that every pound spent on public realm will almost certainly trigger more private investment, because what it does is it makes a place look more desirable. If a retailer is looking to open a first store or a second or a third or a 100th, they will be doing some location analysis, and they'll be looking at the demographic, and they'll also be looking at the desirability of the area. Do I want my brand to be positioned here? Now, we all know what a rundown high street looks like, and we all know what kind of businesses would be expected to be found in a lower end demographic in a rundown high street. I won't name any brand names, of course. We also all know what a thriving market town looks like, with pretty cake shops, cafes, alfresco dining. A couple of times a week there's a market. It's clean, it's inviting, it's pretty, and there's always something to do. They're places where people who have spending power like to go. So what could you, as the business trading there, do to help your entire place improve its appeal, not just to the locals, but actually to those people who want to pop out somewhere new for the day? So it's really, all of this good stuff is about priming the pump to bring people in. And as I mentioned, I don't expect any retailer to go alone, or you might be the catalyst, but there could be a bid or a council or a town team or a destination marketing organisation who can represent the area. And if you rally a few neighbours and approach them with a joined up proposal and a joined up effort, then it's amazing what can be achieved. It's not just about street cleaning. It's about creating an environment where people want to go. It's, again, not one size fits all. For instance, where you have pedestrianisation, but it means that deliveries can't get in, or it confuses drivers and they can't find the parking, that will backfire. All of this should be done in consultation with the local community and not done to them. They must have the desire as well for all of this to happen and understand it enhances their experience as opposed to causing them an inconvenience. Then we need to think about a smarter commercial strategy. And I like to say, don't play shops. So this is for the retailers. You've got to treat your business like a business. It's not a hobby. It's not a hope. If it is a hobby, fine, fair enough. Expect to lose your life savings. It probably won't make money unless you treat it like a business. So what do businesses have to think about? Who's the customer? Exactly what is it are you offering? Therefore, what is your range? What products are you going to stock at the detail level? At what price points and what margins? And are the prices aligned with the perceived value? You need to get the mix right, the pricing and promotions right, and you need to trim the fat so that you've got a curated range. Customers are often overwhelmed with choice. I mean, think about it nowadays. If you go to, the shampoo aisle in a supermarket, there's that many. I just look at it all and walk away because it's just overwhelming. There's often too much choice, and choice can put people off. So a nicely curated range with maybe good, better, best, that keeps things simple. It provides solutions for a sensible range of budgets. Even if your ideal customer has got a good spending power, there'll still be some months they've had a big bill come in and they might have to trade down. So a good, better, best scenario always works and keeps customers happy without overwhelm. And all that commercial strategy's fine. But above everything else, you've got to train the team. Service is edge. Consultative sales, knowing how to curate the sale, knowing when to step away and knowing when to step in. Upsell, cross-sell, it seems to be a lost skill. I'm sorry to say, but you often go into a retailer and the assistant grunts at you. Morning. It's awful. But you know what? When you meet a friendly, knowledgeable assistant who knows you and knows that knowing you is worth more than any fancy signage, that's a bit of a joy. Because working with a retailer means that you're actually their representative to the customer. Another thing, I've mentioned Pret before in a previous episode. Pret once said at a conference I was at that they didn't recruit on CVs and skills. They recruited on attitude. Because as long as somebody had a happy, open, willing attitude, you could pretty much teach them everything else they needed to know. And that really stuck with me. Because you could meet somebody who's the best barista in the world, but if they're rude to the other members of the staff and they're grumpy with customers, they're just going to create problems for you. But there's nothing to stop you teaching a happy, smiley person with no skills whatsoever how to be the best barista in the world. And chances are they'll be even better, because not only will they make great coffee, they'll make people smile. And I've also mentioned moments of joy. Great service is unfortunately quite uncommon. So giving really good service, helping customers, facilitating, knowing the product, actually can be a moment of joy, especially if you're unfamiliar with a purchase, because you think, oh, thank goodness, you've made my life so much easier today. In this case, I remember my grandmother trying to go and find, I think it was some kind of game for my son for Christmas. She hadn't got a clue what she was doing, but she went into a couple of stores and they just went, the games are over there, and left her to it. And she was a bit like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then somebody came and said, you look a bit confused, madam. Would you like me to help you? And she phoned me and said, I met this really lovely lady and she helped me and I hope I've got the right thing. And she had, and it made all the difference. Now, if that person hadn't approached her, she wouldn't have spent her money there. And that's why it's so important. And also, she rang me to tell me about what a great experience she'd had. Now, if you extrapolate that to the modern world, that might go on a Facebook post or on an Instagram or on a TikTok, who knows? But if somebody has a great experience, unfortunately, it's so rare that they do talk about it. Oh, they definitely talk about bad experiences. They're very vocal about those. But yeah, they do talk about good experiences. So it's always worth making sure that you train your team in the best possible customer service. And the other thing is linking to the place activities above. Collaborate. Could you cross-promote your business with some other business that shares a similar customer base? So, for example, if you do children's shoes and there's a toy shop down the road, what's to say you couldn't buddy up with each other and help cross-promote? And both in the real world and on social media, local groups on Facebook and destination marketing organisations have often supported local businesses with promotional posts, lovely photography and so on. And if all the businesses shared each other's posts onto each other's social pages, that would really amplify. And it's not about, well, that's taking the customer off me. If you have one customer, but each of 10 businesses have one customer, potentially that means 10 businesses, 10 customers. And that's why it works. And even if this week they spend with your neighbour, next week their neighbour's customer might spend with you. So it's about taking that leap of faith and not being so protective about your customer base and opening up to collaborate within the local area. There's a couple of other initiatives I've seen, things like shop local passports, shared loyalty cards between businesses. In Destination Lincolnshire, they have the Lincolnshire gift card, which is something that provides the opportunity for venues like hotels and like Airbnb type places to give a gift on a card that can only be spent within the local participating businesses. So it keeps the money in the local economy. But all of this is just about being proactive, visible, and joined up. The thing is, there's no fairy tales about the high street, but there is a future. The fact is, the high street in some streets, think about the historic high streets we've got in the UK. They've been around for between 300 and 500 years. It started out as housing, but maybe with a market stall in front of the house. And then the stall became the shop at the bottom and the accommodation was above. And it's evolved. And it's always been evolving and it's been changing with transport and the way people live their lives. When women started to go out to work full time, for instance, it changed the footfall pattern. And the high street didn't die. It didn't suddenly disappear. It's still there. But what's happening within each and every high street matters. So it's evolving, and it's evolving far faster than ever before. Footfall's still a bit bumpy, to say the least. Budgets are tight. But the bright spots are, there are mixed-use precincts. They're quite resilient. Perhaps with skate parks, graffiti areas and other things to do so that any behaviour that might have been considered antisocial has its own zone, and graffiti artists are encouraged to do their graffiti within a place. Certainly, I've seen something on the South Bank in London, which is a brilliant example of this. Retail parks are holding their own, but of course, they're not necessarily positive to the high street. However, shopping centres within town centres are very positive. And the one thing that is absolutely clear, the good digital integration really does drive footfall. But I do want to say it again loud and clear. Stop playing shops. Start being a really viable business. Cutting red tape's great, but it isn't the main course. We need customers with money, streets worth visiting, and retailers that do the basics brilliantly. And this means smarter costs, smarter marketing, smarter streets. There's no point being nostalgic about what it was like in the 70s with the butcher, the baker and the candlestick maker. This is about strategy that's relevant today and into the future. I think with the right focus and planning, our high streets can honestly thrive again. They won't be the same, but they should be proud, profitable and worth a visit. Hopefully you found today's episode useful. If you did, please share it, rate it, subscribe. You know the drill. If you're a retailer, place manager or policy maker with skin in the game, I'd be happy to talk. This is Retail Reckoning. I'm Clare Bailey. I'll speak to you next time.
Yeah.